let's continue on then on page 368. Toward the top of the page, now I will explain the genuine essence. So from the root text, the naturally settled state, samsara and nirvana, cannot possibly exist within the fundamental unconditioned state. The naturally settled state, positive and negative, acceptance and rejection, cannot possibly exist. The naturally settled state, dualistic perceptions involving renunciation or attainment, cannot possibly exist. The naturally settled state, the 5 emotional poisons, cannot possibly exist. The naturally settled state, restrictions and extremes, cannot possibly exist. The naturally settled state, dynamic energy and the arising of things, cannot possibly exist. The naturally settled state, there is nothing to prevent it from being labeled, however inadequately.
No.
And so continuing on 369 here, a little above the middle of the page, you may wonder, given that there is nothing to prevent them from being labeled, how is it that neither dynamic energy nor any basis for what arises exists? I will explain. From the root text. Within naturally occurring timeless awareness, a state beyond labels in which phenomena resolve, whatever arises as its dynamic energy and display is in fact without basis. The way of abiding, in which there is neither bondage nor freedom, is the naturally settled state. What is symbolically labeled freedom is simply a state in which things vanish naturally, leaving no trace. And since there is no contradiction in labeling it as anything or nothing, we describe it with the words timelessly free. So we can label it, but the label's irrelevant. It may be helpful to us from a relative point of view, but ultimately doesn't really matter. Label, no label, no label, whichever way you want to view it. So labels are just conventional designations. On page 372, at the top, now I will explain the mode of timeless freedom in more detail. So from the root text here, there is no division or exclusion. There is freedom in the expanse of spontaneous presence. There is no union or separation. There is freedom in the expanse of the sphere of being. Anything that at all arises, there is freedom in the expanse in which everything is indeterminate. Just let it be. Bottom of the next page, 373. Now it can be shown that sensory appearances that arise as a display due to dynamic energy are free in their own place within the expanse in which they have no independent nature. Forms manifest. Sensory appearances are free in their own place. Sounds are audible. What is audible is free in its own place. Odors are sensed. Sensations are free in basic space. Flavors are tasted and tactile sensations are felt. They are free in the context of their own place. Consciousness and mental events are free without basis, foundation, or support. So everything, even though we give them these labels, these ideas of being things in a way, are ultimately free. They transcend those ideas. Continuing on page 376, he's continuing here with some of his commentary, but he's quoting from the source verses on sublime knowing, toward the bottom half of the page here. The second part of the quote, Buddhas teach about identity as well as no identity and nothing whatsoever. Even as they label something empty, they also speak of it as not empty. So this is the idea here. We can give it labels, but also what appears to be the opposite of that, or the missing, that not being there at all. Okay, the not something. All of those are part of the Buddhist teachings. So then they're continuing at the bottom of the page. Now it can be shown that the process of labeling itself is timelessly free. So from the root text, there is freedom in oneness, freedom in the expanse that is the true nature of phenomena. There is no duality, freedom in the equalness of sense objects and mind. There is naturally occurring freedom, freedom in the expanse of timeless awareness. There is spontaneously present freedom, freedom in the purity of the ground of being as basic space. Moving over to page 380. The middle of the page. The key point to determine here is that the display is free in its true nature. So from the root text, there is freedom in the variety of things, freedom within the unique expanse. There is freedom not subject to extremes, freedom within the spontaneously present expanse. There is universal freedom, freedom within the expanse of the heart essence. So within that expanse, the expanse is where we begin to take on labels and so forth like that, but it's free of all of those labels. We just use them for conventional discussion. And then third line in his commentary below that quote, when yogins realize this to be so, their minds are free of the bondage caused by reifying things. That freedom is said to arise naturally as the realization that the unity of appearance and emptiness is the unity of awareness and emptiness. Now, in talking earlier, we talked about different forms of how different paths view the idea of wisdom, the ultimate. And so from the path of individual liberation, we talked about appearance, emptiness. And in doing that, we talked about the emptiness of self and the emptiness of other, all of these things. And we do that through a fairly analytical kind of a process. And then we talked about luminous emptiness in the path of altruism, the Mahayana. So we're looking, emptiness is beyond just a total void of anything at all. It has this luminous quality to it, a knowing, a direct experience of that. And then we go to Tantra, we talk about bliss emptiness. And the fact that there's this kind of a quality of transcendent bliss or inner peace that goes along with that. And then finally we come to the path of great perfection, or Dzogchen, where we look at it as awareness emptiness, this pure awareness sense of emptiness. And so that's what we're referring to here. Ultimately, we talk about compassion emptiness, the level of a Buddha. And so all of those are incorporated. But the way to look at it is not that it's this and then this and then this and then this, but rather it is an object within which all of those are subsumed. Just depends on how we look at the object. One time we look at it this way, another time we look at it a different way, another way, and so forth. But all of those are embodied within that object. Continuing on then on the next page, 382, middle of the page. Now, it can be demonstrated that everything is pure in the unwavering unity of emptiness and lucidity. So from the root text, there is freedom as utter lucidity, freedom within the expanse of the sun and the moon. There is freedom as the true nature of phenomena, freedom within the expanse of space. There is freedom of objects in the phenomenal world, freedom within the expanse of the ocean. There is unchanging freedom, freedom within the expanse of the most majestic mountain. So all of these things, large things, are within the expanse. Okay, they're within this idea of space. They just exist, they just are. The suchness, if you will. On the next page, about a third of the way down, he says, freedom is ensured by your realizing the ultimate meaning of awareness beyond effort or achievement. Moving on to page 385, close to the top here. Now everything can be subsumed in terms of awakened mind. So from the root text, there is primordial freedom, freedom in the unborn expanse. There is freedom in the single state of evenness, freedom in the expanse of timeless awakening. There is total freedom, freedom in the timelessly unfolding expanse. So regarding awareness, toward the bottom of the page, he says, since it is lucid by nature, it is not subject to the extreme of nihilistic denial. So it does exist. You can't say that it's just a total void. And then on page 386, the second paragraph here, kind of wrap up what he's been talking about in this chapter. It is realized by a yogin who experiences the dynamic energy of the vast expanse. It is discovered without being sought, ensured without being achieved, seen without being looked at, reached without being approached, pure without being refined, understood without being studied, and free without being cultivated in meditation. So it's beyond all of those things. No effort, nothing is required to do this. You abide in the natural state of rest, the state of equalness, without renouncing, without accepting, without affirming, without denying, without thinking, without describing, and without wavering. Other than this, there is no phenomena, no mind, no karma, nothing to do, no effort, no view, no meditation, no conduct, no fruition, no basic space, no timeless awareness, no samsara, not even a nirvana that exists. Since this state is naturally pristine, naturally resolved, naturally empty, naturally pure, and naturally decisive, there is not even the perception of some unique, unobstructed state of timeless perfection. Just a freedom from restrictions, unobstructed as naked state in which phenomena resolve. It is my opinion that at this point you have arrived at the enlightened intent of the supreme spaciousness that is Samittabhadra. Nothing more to say.